What's up gamers, DreamcastGuy here, reviewing today's Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. I want to start this video off with a little bit of a confession, which is that years ago when I first started making YouTube videos, I would sometimes be afraid of trying to cover certain games because they were truly marvelous. I had this fear inside myself that I didn't have the words to properly convey and explain why this project was so special. And honestly, for the first time in a very long while, I once again have that terror within me, because this game is something that is so unique and so spectacular that trying to really cover it all is something that takes a tremendous amount of work, but I promise you, I'm going to do my very best. Super Smash Bros. Ultimate is by far the most solid title in the series, and now easily ranks as one of the most superb Nintendo Switch games ever made. Beyond that though, it's something that's just something that everybody needs to play, because it's something that is incredibly fun even if you're not normally into fighters. So let's begin this deep dive review by checking out the newly introduced Story of Light mode. Now, I'm not going to be getting into any spoilers, but I want to talk a lot about how it functions because it is very different and something that's very, very cool to try and sink your teeth into, and honestly, is the easiest way to unlock the massive 74-person roster. The opening movie shows us a universe where everyone has been killed or captured by a mysterious power and is now having their bodies used to magically pump out evil clones. These empty shells, though, they don't really contain the original thoughts and souls of the hero, and instead are driven by spirits. What this means is that when you face off against the fighter, they don't really behave the way you might expect. Like, just as an example, say that I'm going in a match against Wario, who's possessed by the soul of Charging Chuck. Well, this will probably make it where he continually does a dash attack using a shoulder push the same way Charging Chuck would. Or if I'm going against somebody like King DDD and he has a giant spirit within it, perhaps it will supersize him and make it where all of his attacks do 20 times the damage. Each one of these little matches is basically a matter of trying to learn how this enemy is going to act because it's so different, and also it's one of those things that really sort of teaches you the fact that, well, you can't really expect any enemy to behave the way you might think. During these matches, you also begin to get your first real feeling about the fact that this game is very overhauled in the balance region. I mean, almost every character from Zelda and Sheik and even Donkey Kong now have completely new sets of moves that are going to baffle you in some way. And I very much like this. You know, one of my personal favorites is being able to play as the adult Link, which is in this, and he now has a lot of different magic abilities that are carried over from Breath of the Wild. So as I was going through this mode and slowly unlocking people and getting further in the map, I couldn't help but really kind of acknowledge the fact that this is really a completely new game, despite the fact that certain people were trying to spread rumors that this was a Smash 4 port. Now, I want to talk a little bit more about balancing later on when we get into multiplayer, but for now, let's get back to World of Light. So whenever you manage to beat one of these matches and basically bash the souls out of one of these husks, you get it as a collectible called a spirit. Now once you have these in your inventory, you get into the much more RPG-ish aspect of World of Light. So you basically have a gear menu that lets you equip a main spirit and sub-spirits, each one's having very different abilities. These can do things that make it where you have extra attack, better defense, or an ability to grab people a little bit more efficiently, or some of them will do stuff like make it where you start a match with an item already in your hand. But what's really key here is trying to level them up. You can choose any ones you want, and some will definitely give you better bonuses for a particular fight, but in my experience, it's definitely the best to just basically choose the setup you like the most and stick with them, power leveling them all the way up to 99 so you can unlock their true secret potential. Now, I do think that this is a good way to do it, but I wish that certain fights were a little bit easier. This isn't at all a complaint, and I don't think it's a detriment. It's just something I want to warn you about, which is that despite the fact that I'm making this look rather easy, most of the time I would actually lose some of these matches 10 times in a row. I'm just editing those out and showing you the one time I won. It's because most of these matches are actually 3 to 5 on 1, and you're just completely against these incredibly stacked odds. And basically, until you unlock the hero that you're best with, you're usually stuck using people like Olimar and trying to learn his moveset while going against enemies that are not at all behaving normally. I think that this is really cool though, and it really kind of trained me both physically and mentally to be very, very prepared for all the different stages and all the different matches I had ahead when I jumped into multiplayer, which is a freaking masterpiece. So for this, I was very lucky to actually be playing it with a lot of professional Smash players. Some friends of mine are actually people who do tournaments all the time, so when you see all this multiplayer gameplay, these dudes are monsters who know everything they can about the series. So when I got to go toe-to-toe against them, I truly got to admire the fact that this is a fully realized world that is more than just a normal sequel, but is in fact the ultimate version of Super Smash. Now, one of the first modes I really want to talk about is something that is sort of multiplayer and definitely more single-player focused, which is Classic Mode. This is a very retro-styled arcade match where basically you keep going into a series of fights over and over again, and each one gets increasingly more difficult. And it can be done by yourself or with one friend. And I have to say that doing this co-op is such a freaking thrill because you really get a chance to call out targets, work together, and, well, eventually totally get your butts kicked. And it's here where I really began to acknowledge the fact that the 100 stages or whatever in this are just crazy. They really brought back everything from old school, cool new soundtracks, great little twists on the older stages that really kind of make you realize that this is something that's trying to basically use the full potential of modern gaming while still very much rooted in the best games of the past. Now, in normal multiplayer, like just where you're trying to beat each other up and get the most kills possible, this is where I think things get really, really weird, but in a positive way. So during all my matches, I purposely kept items on and mostly did 3 stock, just because honestly, I wanted to get the best experience to see what all the new items and what the assist trophies are like. And when I got into these, I really began to acknowledge that the 74 characters in this are crazy wide-ranging in their abilities. Like, let's just talk about some of the new fighters. Incineroar is a nutcase. Now, this dude is obviously supposed to be a Pokemon who specializes in professional wrestling and does grab attacks, but his up B, down B combo is practically overpowered because it does decent damage and it homes in. That is what's cool about it though, is that as you try and learn these new different fighters, you really begin to really understand that they're trying to change the meta of this universe, making it where everybody has to fight and behave differently in the battlefield. Now let's talk about Richter. Now this is another new guy that I totally fell in love with because he's more than just a Castlevania fighter. His abilities are great. I love trying to basically use a bunch of different skills from throughout the Castlevania series to throw axes, light people on fire, and of course use his chain grab attack. Trying to master these new fighters really shines a spotlight on how the series has evolved over time, because obviously in this we're getting every character that's ever existed in the entire Smash saga, but now seeing the last fighters that will perhaps ever exist join this universe is really a great spotlight on the fact that this is not the series we've always known. It's better, it's bigger, and it is a lot more insane. Now, let's just look at some random 8-player matches because these are flat out chaos. And it's also the time where I feel like you really begin to understand that the new items are flat out bizarre in how powerful they can be. Now, one of them being the assist trophies. Whenever these little colorful capsules appear, you can pick them up and unleash some sort of random character from some sort of random universe. It could be somebody like Waluigi, or a big giant Bullet Bill, or it can even be things like Rathlos from freaking Monster Hunter. Now, here's the thing, I wish that these things were a little bit less powerful, because some of them are, quite frankly, a little bit too much. I mean, if I'm dropping a dragon into the battlefield, it's gonna start knocking people off, even if I try to get the finishing blow myself. It made it where everybody a lot of times was trying to compete, not just to get that next big hit, but also to make sure that you had all the most overpowered items. Now, this can obviously be toggled off, so it's not a huge deal, but there's other stuff along with this that I think is really, really neat. Like, there are now fake smash balls. So if you're trying to get ready to do your ultimate smash and you see one floating around, you need to hesitate for a microsecond and make sure it is real, because if you break a fake smash token, it will explode like a nuclear blast and most likely deal 100 damage if it doesn't just skyrocket you off. Now, obviously that's really hilarious, but it's just really, really cool to see the fact that they're definitely trying to cram the fun party mode into this, to make it where a game where you can just sit down with 7 friends like I did and have a ball and not really have to worry about the rules and seriousness that some previous Smashes had. Now, the final mode that I really want to talk about, and by far my favorite part of the entire freaking game, is Smashdown. This is, in my opinion, a total game changer. It is a special mode that you go into where every time you do a match, the characters you picked disappear off the roster, which means that if you're playing with like 5 of your friends, every time you pick somebody, it's going to slowly shrink down the pool of possible fighters. So if you're somebody like me who's really, really good with Zelda characters, I of course tried to burn through everybody I knew best during the beginning. If you win a match, you get a point, and it keeps going until the entire roster completely disappears, which means that the longer it goes on, the more desperate you're going to become, because obviously, if you're really, really good at one character, you're probably not going to be better with another. So eventually I got stuck with characters I'm pretty bad with, like Dark Pit, trying to chomp off faces of Wario and Luigi. And it was so freaking fantastic because it made it where eventually we all kind of sucked equally and were just cracking up about how fun and freaking hungry we were for that next big win. If I had to have any real complaint about this game, about anything I think that kind of sucks, it's that some of the new stages just aren't great. I mean, I would say that 99.9% of every place you battle each other on is fantastic, but there are a couple spots that definitely don't shine as bright as others. Like this one, it's like a weird Pac-Man world, and it's not that it flat out is disgusting or terrible, so much as that it's overly complicated. Since it has this really weird 2D art to it, a lot of times when it's moving super fast, people are falling off the screen and dying, and so it made it where with practice we could avoid the pitfalls, but in general I found that when I was trying to play with people, more often than not, people were dying from hazards instead of the actual combat, which really kind of takes away from the magic of a good Smash match. Okay, so we've heard a ton of good and a tiny bit of bad, but let's go to the ratings board and put a big number on it. I am giving Super Smash Bros. Ultimate a 10 out of 10. This is now one of those games that I think is going to be in every person's library eventually because it's just too good to pass up. Even if you're playing by yourself and just enjoying the story mode, or if you're trying to go through the single player challenges, or if you're somebody like me who wants to go online and beat in some faces, it has something for everyone, and you just gotta love that. Thanks so much for watching, gamers. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, share with your friends, and subscribe if you haven't already. But do me the biggest favor of all and keep dreaming. Oh, hey, I was just playing a little bit of Grand Theft Auto on my Darth Vader PSP. Are you curious what I'm going to come out with next? Well, if you click this button, you'll be subscribed to be the first to know. Also, if you click over here and here, you can see my latest review and my latest top 10. I promise, it was super good. Or it was really bad, and I'm sure you can just make fun of me in the comments. Either way, it'll be a lot of fun. Thanks so much for watching.